We are indivisible. We are indivisible. When our hearts are joined with kindness and with love, we are indivisible. We are indivisible. We are indivisible. When our hearts are joined with kindness and with love, we are indivisible.
I'd like to recognize Keena Collins. Keena, are you here yet? Or maybe not yet. Running for the Democratic primary nomination for the 7th Congressional District to replace retiring Congressman Danny Davis. And Felix Tello, who I did see here, who's running in the same race. Uh-oh. So you might have to write 2 checks tomorrow. Claire Kelly from the Evanston City Council. There's Claire back there. Thank you, Claire, for joining us. Reverend Willie Preston, the Illinois State Senator from the 16th District. Not sure if everybody's on time or not. Bushra Amiwala is the primary candidate for the Democratic nomination in the 9th Congressional District. Bushra will be joining us after dinner for the program. And although he was unable to be with us tonight, I want to recognize a former NISP board member. For those of you who don't know, Chicago Area Peace Action was, from 1979 until about 2012, the North Suburban Peace Initiative. A former NISP board member and an annual platinum level sponsor of this event for more than 30 years, the now retired Cook County Commissioner Larry Suffredin and his wife Gloria Calici, who are platinum sponsors again this year. Did I miss anyone who's currently serving or running to serve next year? Raise your hand if I did. Oh, I didn't see you here, Gail. Gail Schechter, the newly elected, less than a year ago, at-large trustee for the village of Skokie. And on a side note, Gail not only ran for that seat, she created the entire structure. It created 4 districts in Skokie and at-large seats to take it away from a single-party caucus system. And now, Skokie residents have a true choice and a true voice. Thank you, Gail. Now I'd like to acknowledge a few people who've been an integral part of our work this past year. Lake Street Church Peace and Justice Committee, who've been our stalwart partners on all Palestinian rights programs throughout the year. Representing Lake Church P&J is the indomitable and tireless Ron Cox. Ron, raise your hand. There he is. We call Ron the chief cook and Bible washer on all things Lake Street Church related. Carter Cleland, who along with, is Carter here? Hi Carter, I see you back there. Carter Cleland, who along with Carrie Hall, held space and holds space every Saturday morning since the inauguration at the Wilmette Village Hall from 11 a.m. till noon. Is that right? Or is it noon until 1? 11 till noon, and who organized our No King's Day protest this past Saturday, which he thought 200 people had registered for until 800 people showed up at the Village Hall in Wilmette. Thank you, Carter. And finally, Aaron Bassett Garcia. Aaron, wave a little so folks know who you are. Thank you. Who grabbed the reins of our nascent idea 11 months ago to hold bi-monthly public square conversations and coordinated them with efficiency, conscience, and grace, allowing people the latitude to express their own conscience and ideas for how we move forward in this moment. Recently, Aaron joined our leadership committee to provide weekly oversight of our work as an organization. Stay tuned for more on the work that Aaron is doing. And let me finally thank our entire dinner coordinating committee. Who wants to wave? Marcia's on that committee, Jim Huffman, I think, and most of the board. Our topic this evening is a timely one. When politics fail, conscience as resistance. And we have an incredibly talented panel to help us explore what this means. I'll do my best in just a minute or two to frame what I think many of us are feeling in the moment. And hopefully, through the expert guidance of our panel, by the end of the evening, we'll all come away with some hope, some direction, and a renewed sense of how we might right this ship. Sometimes it feels just dreamlike, as though we were walking through a familiar front yard to the door of a familiar house, only to discover we're suddenly standing in the foyer of a decidedly unfamiliar, haunted house, where nothing seems as it was, or as it should be. The air is somehow tainted, our vision is slightly blurred, we're not certain of what we're hearing, our very skin feels unsettled, and we can almost taste the acrid aura of autocracy. Where there once was sunlight and joy, there is now darkness and fear. Where there was once empathy and compassion, there's now cruelty and heartlessness. This feeling of disequilibrium is so disquieting that it demands our full attention for a moment, and then, just like waking from a disturbing nightmare, we must take another moment to allow that part of our brain that reasons to take control. And we begin to see what our distractions and what are our core foundational values that ground us in these seemingly unmoored times. I'm reminded of a quote from Viktor Frankl, the famous Austrian philosopher, Holocaust survivor, and brilliant public intellectual, who said, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies our ability to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and freedom." And thus we find stability in these core values: inclusion, empathy, compassion, human dignity, and respect for all lives, irrespective of race, creed, or country of origin. So what is happening in front of our eyes feels like daily outrage. It's imperative that we're able to take a half a step back and separate the real threats from the intentional distractions. I also think it's important to understand this emergency, this uniquely dystopian moment, is not something that we will overcome with the next election, or even the next several electoral cycles. Indeed, what has begun to metastasize in the electorate nationally is in itself a social movement, and it will take a concerted social movement steeped in values that may have been forgotten in the minds of many to defeat. Every so often, a generation is called upon to act, to sacrifice a little bit for future generations to ensure safety and security. That task never comes easily, but for this time, it falls upon us. So let this gathering here tonight be part of the beginning, a rebirth of our commitment to restore and inject the ideals of respect, inclusion, and justice for all into the debate in the public square. And in so doing, carry this message forward to all generations living now in the United States, that we stand for principles that have been developed over many generations, and we will not go quietly into that good night. Thank you for being here. Are we ready, Amy? Good. So the food tonight is catered by Kurt's Cafe. So let's give them a round of applause as well. Thank you so much again for being here. Thank you for being part of this and being part of where we're headed over the next decade. Thank you.
Okay, we are about to move into the next part of our program, so thank you so much everyone for getting some good food and drinks, and it is beautiful to see this whole room of people. I am going to talk about a couple of things that are new at Kappa, and very excited to mention a couple of things. First of all, earlier this year, Kappa was able to hire a second staff member, and we brought on Rachel Nelson. So Rachel is there by the registration table, and it has been so wonderful having Rachel with us on board, and just allows us to do a lot more of what we do more smoothly. Rachel has been in the Chicago North Side all her life, and she's passionate about Chicago and about peace. So we're grateful to have her on board with us. Another great news at Kappa is that we have been able to make a connection with Northeastern Illinois University for a student internship. This is something exciting because we have had student networks and student chapters in the past, but recently we had some of the student chapters that their work has been so tough, you know, that the energy has been really drained from students, and they've been suppressed in their speech, and they've been exhausted by everything that's going on. But we moved to a new model of having a student internship, and we're really excited about this. So we'd like to mention Rolando from Northeastern Illinois. Rolando, there he is. Rolando's in the Justice Studies program at Northeastern, and he has jumped right in with us and has been really taking a big part in our meetings and in our work. And one of the things we can announce is that he is going to be hosting an event at the Northeastern Illinois University campus. And the whole public is welcome to come to that event. It's on November 6th, and it features a film, What I Want You to Know, which is a film where veterans show about their experiences with militarism and, you know, their disillusionment with that. So we invite you to that event, and we welcome Rolando. And finally, I would like to mention that we were excited to get a letter of support from Chicago's Mayor Brandon Johnson. As you know, there's been so much going on with Chicago being threatened with attacks and being facing deployments of ICE and of National Guard. Mayor Johnson has spoken out strongly against those things happening, and has extended us this letter of support, so I'll read it for you real quickly. As mayor, and on behalf of the city of Chicago, I extend my deep appreciation and support for the work of Chicago Area Peace Action and your decades-long commitment to peace, justice, and environmental stewardship. For nearly half a century, Kappa has stood as a steadfast advocate for a safer, more just, and more sustainable world. From your founding efforts to oppose nuclear proliferation, to your present work addressing the root causes of war, including your advocacy for peace in Palestine, and your dedication to combating climate degradation, Kappa continues to embody the conscience and compassion that define our city's best traditions of civic engagement. The theme of your 2025 benefit, When Politics Fail, Conscience as Resistance, resonates deeply in these challenging times. It reminds us that progress often depends not only on policy, but on the moral courage of citizens, and organizations like yours who speak truth to power and act in defense of our shared humanity. I hope you have an enjoyable event. Best wishes for continued success. So we're grateful for that letter of support from the mayor. And with that, I would like to hand it off to one of CAPA's newest board members, Erin, who will tell us something else that's new.
Thank you, Charles. Good evening, everyone. My name is Erin Bosick. I want to start by talking about an initiative we began in 2025. CAPA hosted a series of public square conversations. We were just entering the second Trump administration, and we recognized that members of CAPA and the community at large would probably welcome the opportunity to discuss their shared concerns. These events were quite successful and presented an opportunity for us to gain perspectives, practice communicating about current issues, and take heart from the discovery of our shared values. Building on this model, we will now transition to a new type of event in 2026, the Members Forum. These CAPA events will take place 3 times a year and provide a place for you to share ideas, collaborate with other members, and help shape CAPA's program priorities for 2026. We plan to hold the first Members Forum in March or April of next year, so stay tuned for more information about this exciting opportunity. It'll be a chance for us to gain strength through collaboration and for you to shape the direction of CAPA's work this year. I now want to recognize the conveners of CAPA's various working groups and committees. If I call your name, if you would please stand for a moment. The co-conveners of the Foreign Policy Working Group are Marcia Bernstein and David Phelps. The co-conveners of the Climate Working Group are Carrie Hall and Jack Kelly. And the convener of the Communications Committee is Jim Huffman. Thank you all for your service. Tonight we have an opportunity for you. CAPA is about action, right? So we want to invite you to take action on 2 issues that are important to CAPA. We're launching 2 postcard campaigns. I'd like to first tell you about these and give you instructions for signing, and then volunteers will distribute the postcards to your tables. The first campaign urges Governor Pritzker to keep the moratorium on building large-scale nuclear plants in Illinois. You can read more on the postcard about the reasons for our stance on this issue. The second campaign encourages Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan to maintain her opposition to Enbridge's Pipeline 5, which poses environmental risks to the Great Lakes region and infringes on Native American treaty rights. It's important that you include your name, your address, and your zip code. Even though the postcard doesn't prompt you specifically for a zip code, it's important that that is included. So please do fill out all those parts of the postcard, and then you can leave them on your table. We will collect them and mail them on your behalf. If those postcards can get passed out now, that would be great. Thank you. Finally, we are very grateful to have received a video message from Congresswoman Delia Ramirez from Illinois' 3rd District, sharing her thoughts about our current political climate.
I'm Delia Ramirez, and I represent the 19th Congressional District, a district that is home to a diverse community of immigrants, to progressive, multiracial, multicultural coalition that built me and continues to keep me grounded. A coalition that has created opportunities for someone like me, a daughter of immigrants, to dream, to organize, and to act for our diverse communities, to be able to create a future where we all thrive. And while I'm sad I'm not able to join you, the Chicago Area Peace Action in person today, I wanted to share a message with you and thank you for the work that you're doing to create a more peaceful world for all of us. You see, creation is a revolutionary idea, especially in the time of war. Let me be clear. We are living a time of war. We live in a country addicted to war, surrounded by world leaders who wage war because they believe in this strong man idea of peace through strength. And you and I both know that authoritarian governments, whether it's Donald Trump at home here in the US, or Putin in Russia, or Bibi Netanyahu in Israel, they wage war to silence dissent and to undermine resistance. Why, you ask? Because they want our resources. They want our land, they want our freedoms, they want our lives so that they can advance their imperialistic, authoritarian agendas across the entire world. And that's why it's more important than ever that we understand that the world we create here at home and around the world in solidarity must be with our neighbors and rooted in peace. It has to be strengthened through democracy and justice, and it has to be built on diplomacy and human rights. We have to be building community systems and movements that are rooted in a radical love for people, that are willing to defy authoritarian control, and that reflect our commitment to justice, our commitment to equity and human dignity. And it also requires that we choose love over hate, that we choose relationship over conquest, cooperation over competition, and that we choose diplomacy over domination. And I know that this moment feels like we're living literally the opposite, right? It feels like we're living in a life of hate, of conquest, of competition and domination. But I also know that our work is possible, and the contrary is possible, because it is happening across the nation, and you are part of it. You are imagining, creating, and building a system of care. You're building a system of love, of support, of dignity, the kind of dignity that we need to thrive, in spite of the war being waged against our communities. We together are creating a future that reflects our progressive, working, people-centered values. We are creating a future in which working people have every single thing they need to thrive. And I want to remind you that we are a movement, a global, interconnected movement. A movement that starts in Humboldt Park, goes to Washington, D.C., to Honduras, to Palestine, to Ukraine, and the Congo. We have the power to organize, to build power, to practice solidarity, to shift the narrative, and to take care of each other. And so I want to remind you that we will create a more just, a more peaceful and loving world that honors our shared humanity. Because we're doing that together. Whether it's in the halls of Congress, whether it's at a rally, at a community meeting, or in our everyday work. Seamos luces en la oscuridad, seamos fuente de esperanza, seamos lazos de hermandad. Let us be that light together. And thank you, Chicago Area Peace Action, for the ways that you are showing light and you're reminding us of the world that we're building together. Pa'lante. Hasta la victoria.
Let's have a nice round of applause for Rosen Ramirez in absentia. Thank you, Delaware. And now we come to a pretty special part of our evening, the presentation of our Chicago Area Peace Action Pursuit of Peace Awards. This year, we have two honorees to be introduced to you by Catherine Munton and Marsha Bernstein. This year, the award presentation is made even more special because it's the first time we'll be awarding the newly named Cleland Tholen Pursuit of Peace Award. You can read details about the addition of Richard Tholen's name to this honorific in your program, but I want to say just a few words on behalf of the board, particularly the members of the board who were fortunate enough to serve with Dick when he was president of the board, and thereafter, while he continued on the board as a past president. I showed up at Jack and Maureen Kelly's home on a Wednesday morning in late 2002. I was looking for a place to put my time to oppose the then pending war in Iraq. And that began one of the most rewarding and gratifying relationships in my life. I knew next to nothing about nothing. And the people around that table, Bob Cleland, Nancy Cusack, Jack Kelly, Martha Cray, Bruce McCulloch, and of course, Dick Tholen, patiently educated me over months and years. This group of special individuals took me under their wing and taught me what it means to be an activist for peace and social justice. And none more than Dick Tholen and Robert Cleveland. When I would be too aggressive, which is not hard for me to become, Dick calmly and gently brought me back to earth. When I would be too dismissive of an action, Dick would stand steadfast and explain why it was so important that we act with energy and resolve. I know he had a similar impact on other board members and on almost everyone whose path he crossed. While I still miss his gentle but resolute leadership, 6.5 years later, I'm so pleased that his mission is still carried forth by the organization he gave so much of himself to. And I am personally so very privileged to bring up on stage Catherine and Marcia for the very first presentations of the Cleveland Tholen Pursuit of Peace Awards. Catherine, Marcia, and Phyllis, if you would give a little wave to everybody, thank you for sharing your husband with us for so many years. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Catherine Button, and I have the privilege of introducing Sawsan Abubaker to you tonight. Did I say that right? Abubaker, okay. Sawsan is a Palestinian-American, federally licensed tax strategist and certified tax coach. She was born in the United States, but shaped by 7 years living under Israeli military occupation. She carries a lived experience of what injustice feels like, and a lifelong commitment to confronting it wherever it exists. In November of 24, she co-founded Advocates for Justice, a grassroots collective dedicated to education, awareness, and solidarity across communities. The following month, she co-launched Meet Your Allies, an initiative that creates spaces for honest, respectful dialogue among people of different faiths and cultures and perspectives. Sawsan's activism stems from the urgent need for Palestinian narrative to be heard. We are a people who have been forgotten by design, she says. Education and dialogue are how we break through the false narratives. Community organizing and bringing people from different backgrounds together is her passion and mission. She works to help unify communities during these difficult times, to stand against injustice and to challenge the stereotypes that divide us. Through her moral conviction and heart for humanity, Sawsan works to build bridges of understanding. We met Sawsan when she was identified as a discussant for one of our film showings. After that, she helped us as we collaborated on 10 community programs focused on Palestine and Gaza this past year. She has been an invaluable resource. Thank you, Sawsan, for your timely and impactful work in bringing the Palestinian narrative to us and to our communities. We are happy to present you with the Cleveland Tholen Pursuit of Peace Award tonight.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Catherine, and thank you, Kappa, for this. And I was surprised when Catherine called me to tell me that I was getting this award, because I'm not doing what I'm doing for accolades or recognition. It's for Palestine, for my brothers and sisters suffering in Gaza, and for everybody who's suffering injustice. I do this out of conviction and faith and necessity. and my co-founders, which one of them is sitting back there with me, of Advocates for Justice, and I began this journey because we saw how deeply misinformation and racism have taken root in our society, especially when it comes to Palestinians. We knew that one of the strongest ways to confront oppression and dismantle the false narratives spread by the Zionist regime was through education. By breaking down the stereotypes and misconceptions designed to keep us divided, education is power, and truth has a way of cutting through even the loudest propaganda. I want to sincerely thank Chicago Area Peace Action for this honor and for the partnership we've built in the shared struggle for justice, not just for Palestinians, but for all people. Your work at Chicago Peace Action continues to remind us that peace isn't just the absence of war, it's the presence of justice. This award isn't mine alone. It belongs to my incredible co-founders and partners at Advocates for Justice, whose commitment, courage, and compassion give me strength every day. It also belongs to everyone who shows up, who chooses to listen, to learn, and to stand up even when it's uncomfortable. Most importantly, I dedicate this to my parents. My father's influence continues to shape the person I am, even after his passing. When I was interviewed about this award, I shared how my dad sent us to live in Palestine when I was younger. The interviewer said, "Your father must have been a remarkable man, was he?" And I said, "Absolutely he was." He believed in the power of identity, in knowing where you come from and what you stand for. He taught me that faith without justice is hollow, and he lived that truth. When someone in our family or community needed help, my dad was the one they called. I guess that's where I got it from. My mother was the selfless heart of our family, and she's sitting back there right now, the one who held everything together. She was there when we needed to go back to school or work, and she was the one who took care of my aunt and my grandmother when they were ill without hesitation. Her patience and quiet strength taught me that compassion and resilience can coexist. Together, my parents planted the values that guide everything I do today. And I'm sure I don't tell them that enough, so now you know, Mom. My children and grandchildren, my son is right there, are my teachers. They've shown me what it truly means to fight for those you love. They give me the strength to keep pushing for a better future, because when my time comes and God calls me home, I want to leave them with a society that protects them, not one that oppresses them. We founded Advocates for Justice in 2024. It was never just about one cause, it was about humanity. Because injustice anywhere truly is a threat to justice everywhere. Soon after, as Catherine mentioned, we created Meet Your Allies, and that was a space for open and honest dialogue. We thought that was very important because as a society, we have so many taboo topics that we have forgotten how to talk to each other. And we need to learn to talk to each other so we can connect and unite and fight injustice and stand for all of us, not just one community. I believe God put me on this path for a reason, to help bring people together, to tear down the walls built by fear and propaganda, and to remind us of our shared humanity. So tonight, as I accept this award, I do so not as celebration of achievement, but as a reminder of responsibility, a very big responsibility, to keep showing up, to keep educating, and to keep building bridges even when the world feels divided. So let's always remember that and always work together. And again, thank you, Capo, for this honor.
Hi, I have the pleasure of introducing Andrew Ginsberg. Andrew is so, what can I say, deserving of this award because he also lives it and has lived it most of his adult life, probably all of his life, but we can talk about his adult life in this moment. He started his work doing advocacy with ACORN and other organizations with low-income communities primarily, at healthcare workers, childcare workers, people who are often also not really acknowledged for the hard work that they do. He then decided to move to education and was taking night courses while he was doing that other work, and started his teaching career in Chicago, and for the last 10 years has been at ETHS, where I know from talking to students, his classroom is home to many, many different organizations. When E-Town Sunrise, their climate group, started to work, they used Andrew's classroom as their meeting place, and he is still, to this day, one of their sponsors. And then this year, he became a more or less reluctant celebrity in Evanston because he had a piece of artwork in his classroom that some community members took offense to, that they misunderstood what the art meant, and he was censured as a result. The art was actually done by a Jewish artist, and it depicted the idea that dissent is a key tenet of Judaism, always has been, always will be. So that's how Andrew most recently stood fast with his beliefs and was ready for whatever consequence came, and that's really a lot of what being a peace and justice worker is. So I bring you Andrew Ginsberg.
Thanks, Marcia, for those kind words, and thanks, Kappa, for having me here and giving me this award, which I really must say I do not feel like I deserve. So when I started working as an organizer with ACORN, one of the things we were taught is this is a members organization. Your job as an organizer is to be behind the scenes, to serve the members, to work for them, to use your time and your knowledge and expertise to help people fight for their rights in their communities and their neighborhoods. I really tried to continue with that attitude into the union movement. In fact, one of the reasons I wanted to leave the union movement is because I kind of saw that ethic of the organizer, not sort of being upheld, at least in my local and many others. So for that reason, I'm not really comfortable, being in the forefront and being seen as sort of a leader. I sort of think as someone who's born into privilege, when you're advocating for things, it's best that you stay out and let people who are the most affected by things, be in charge, be running things, be the face of things. So as I've gained this, I forget what Marcia said exactly, but sort of like unwanted celebrity. I really feel like we need to stay focused not on my poster and my fight for free speech and lack of hypocrisy in my school, but on what really matters, which is the genocide in Gaza, the several 100,000 people who died, and the international, seeming consensus to just let it happen. So the real heroes are the people who are taking flotillas to Gaza, the people who are surviving, the people who keep fighting. My students who formed a Palestine Solidarity Club that I was honored to sponsor, who had a sit-in in the front hall of the school. Those are the real heroes. So for me, I teach civics. I teach about people who've led movements, who've taken risks, who sometimes lost their lives. I teach students about those movements, and I ask them to be inspired by it. So when it came my turn, in a very much smaller way, to stand up for myself and stand up for what's right, how could I keep teaching them and look at myself in the mirror if I didn't also stand up for things? And the fact that that is seemingly atypical is very unfortunate. And I think that, standing in this room, I think y'all are folks that can really understand that and are really living that. So it kind of takes me back to you, Marcia mentioned not knowing that much about my childhood, but I have a grandfather who was a longtime Republican, successful capitalist, or somewhat successful, kind of like our president. He inherited most of his money and did worse than his father did. But, so he, amongst other things, liked to say, he had classic lines like "smart is dumb." And then when I was 19, he told me, it's okay to think how you do now at your age, but when you're older, you'll realize how stupid that was, and you'll become conservative like me. So as I get a little bit older, and as I look around this room, I didn't know at the time, I didn't know that many older people, so as I look around the room, as I get a little older, I realize for sure now he was wrong, and I'm proud to be around all of you guys, and thank you so much for your work.
Thank you. So I am Jerry Gorman. I'm a board member of Kappa. And when we first began thinking about the theme for tonight's program, it was early on in this administration. Like so many at the time, we were very moved by the example of Marian Moody, the Episcopal Bishop of Washington, who transcended cautious political euphemisms and spoke directly to the president with the clear tone of moral conviction. We decided to frame tonight's discussion around the theme of conscience as resistance, and we reached out to two local activists whose lives and work reflect this imperative. So tonight, we are so honored to welcome Dennis Kosuth and Rabbi Brant Rosen. So Dennis Kosuth is a longtime activist for social justice. He is active in his unions, and he works as a registered nurse in public schools and at Sturger Hospital. He's been involved in organizing efforts to end the genocide in Palestine through multiple organizations, and Dennis has collaborated with anti-war veterans groups working to counter deployment of troops to Chicago. Welcome, Dennis. Rabbi Brant Rosen serves Tzedek, am I close to Tzedek? I tried practicing this afternoon, so I wouldn't screw it up. Tzedek, Chicago, a synagogue he helped found in 2015. Brant is the co-founder of the Jewish Voice for Peace Rabbinical Council and the Jewish Fast for Gaza. He blogs regularly at the Jewish social justice blog Shalom Rav, and he is the author of the book Wrestling in the Daylight, A Rabbi's Path to Palestinian Solidarity. So please join me in welcoming once again both Dennis and Rabbi Rosen. So to begin, if you could both speak to the evolution of your activism and to the ways in which your own moral compass, however you may define that, has impacted your response to the issues of social justice.
Okay, so just to thank everyone again for taking the time to come here and do all the work that you're doing. So when I was talking with Jerry and Grant about this a couple weeks ago, one of the things Jerry suggested was talking about things from a personal standpoint, so I'm going to have to subject you to some of my personal stories, unfortunately, for the audience. But one place I wanted to start thinking about where my conscience comes from, where my activism comes from, it really stems from my childhood. When I was maybe 6 or 7, I was watching TV with my father, and it was a PBS program about Japan. And unfortunately, when I was watching it, I said, "Oh, this is a show about the Jets." And my dad, his jaw dropped. He's like, "What did you just say, son? That is not a word that we would ever use." And the reason that I had used this is because that's what the neighborhood kids talked about in terms of what we played as children. I grew up in the 80s in a dying industrial town in northern Minnesota, and when you had World War II playing, you were trying to kill the enemy, and that's what they referred to them. And so what I wanted to share tonight is just how people's consciousness gets formed. I think it gets formed by the material conditions around them, and those ideas can change through struggle, through experience. And for the fellow Marxists in the room, I can kind of understand how maybe those words are triggers for people about which direction I'm gonna go in here. So when my mom is an artist, and she studied under a teacher whose name is Roger Shimomura. He was a Japanese American, second generation. His grandmother came to Seattle from Japan, and his earliest memories were from a camp called Minidoka. In Idaho. It was a concentration camp that himself and 120,000 of the Japanese Americans like him were kept following the attack on Pearl Harbor. His earliest memories were from that, and his grandmother was also there with him along with his parents. After Pearl Harbor happened, his grandmother thought that she needed to destroy any connection she had with her home country. So she literally burned every picture, every memory, every item that had come with her from Japan. That obviously did not stop her family from that internment. And she unfortunately passed away while interned in that camp, along with so many other people. The name of that camp is Minidoka, which, like many U.S. Appropriations, is the Dakota word of the Sioux people that means like fountain. So it's just outrageous how these kinds of things get twisted. Like I said, I grew up in the 1980s in Duluth, and I was frequently subjected to racism from my neighbors for various, for understandable reasons, in the sense that there's mostly white people there, and I think people just saw anyone who was another as a person to vent their frustrations on. One time there were some neighborhood kids down the street who were throwing rocks at my sister and myself, and we were just playing, and my dad thought, I'm going to go and maybe talk to this family and try and bring some sense into this household. So he knocks on the door, and the dad answers the phone, and he's wearing a t-shirt that has a picture of a mushroom cloud, and it says on the bottom, nuke them till they glow. And so clearly it was like, this conversation isn't going to go anywhere. I said, I'm going to waste my time here. But I mentioned that because the way that the Japanese internment ended is not because the U.S. government decided, we were doing something wrong. It's because they dropped 2 bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, incinerating hundreds of thousands of people immediately, followed by people who died very slowly and painfully from the subjects of atomic weapons. And that's something that I think we have to understand. Like, how is it, I think for some people, this country can back Israel in its genocide against the Palestinians, and how you can do that with a straight face. And I think you don't have to study U.S. history very deeply to see that as an American act as just like apple pie. There's a long history of that, unfortunately. Dr. Martin Luther King said, as many people in this room already know, in his 1967 speech at Riverside Church, that the greatest purveyor of violence in the world is my own government. And I think we should be very clear about that. Like, I think we have to be understanding about what that history is and which politicians have put that forward. FDR was a Democrat. He was the one who, interned Japanese people, who signed off on dropping 2 atomic bombs. Lyndon Baines Johnson was the Democratic president at the time of the Vietnam War, when so many atrocities were committed under his watch. And then we had this latest war in Gaza that was overseen for the vast majority of it by Democrat Joe Biden. So I'm not saying that anyone who's a Democrat is a piece of garbage, but I also think we should be very clear about who our allies and what we think it's going to take to fight for a better future. So I've talked about some pretty extreme examples of suffering, but I think what's more important for us to think about is how do we convince the people who are not necessarily on that extreme, but people who are just like us. I think, like many people in this room, we all have members of our family or ourselves or veterans. I myself never served. My father was drafted to fight in Vietnam. My grandfather served in the Marines. And I think that is an important thing to understand. Like, my grandfather's experience in World War II was awful, in the sense that he was volunteer after Pearl Harbor. He was in Guam, Guadalcanal, the invasion of Okinawa. For people who know, those were pretty intense things. When he came back, he never talked about his experience. He was not interested in reliving that trauma. The one time I had to interview him for a high school project about war, he basically gave me one sentence. He said, war is like making the best, closest friends you'll ever have, and then seeing them blown up, their bodies destroyed, their arms and limbs all over a beach. And so, that was basically the end of that conversation. And I think it's understandable why he didn't want to talk about it, because he felt like there was some kind of reward for that. Like they had all I was going to say is that his experience, I think, was that you're the tough generation. Out of this suffering, you will get, the white picket fence, et cetera, et cetera. For my father, when he was drafted to fight in Vietnam, the military is a very different place. The anti-movement had come into the bases, and when he was training to become basically an interrogator for the army, the meetings of anti-war activists were happening on the actual base. And that was a testament to the resistance of the Vietnamese people back in that country, who were basically saying, we're not going to allow a foreign body, a foreign country, because they'd already thrown out the Chinese, they'd fought the French, and they were like, not a problem. We'll take care of the Americans in the same kind of way that all these other occupying forces have attempted. And all it is to say is that it spurned a movement, an anti-war movement, that was successful ultimately at ending the war in Vietnam. And so he had a very different experience. And the third member of my family who also served in the military is my cousin. He joined the Army in the late 2000s. He was just interested in that. And that side of my family is more conservative. They basically all voted for Trump, I think both times around. And I got into it with him because when he came back from Afghanistan in 2012, he made a racist comment on social media. When I challenged him, he basically was like, I'm unfriending you. I don't want to talk to you anymore. And tragically, he died from cancer about a month ago. And his family believes it was because of his job that he had in Afghanistan, which basically was burning garbage. And when you learn about the exposure that veterans have had, especially those who served following 9/11, 90% plus of them have been exposed to toxins. All that is to say is that you can have people who maybe are very conservative, very right-wing, but through their experiences, through the things that are happening to them, they can begin to draw different conclusions and begin to turn against the powers that be. And I think that's important to consider if we're talking about a National Guard being deployed in this country. Those are people who are soldiers, who are basically people not too dissimilar from us, and it could be won over to a different view, and I think that's something to keep in mind. I don't think that's the same necessarily with ICE, who are basically Nazis who are volunteering to go and grab children out of schools, but I think definitely if we're talking about the potential that exists among soldiers to resist their orders, that definitely exists. And so I want to end my comments by just saying I think hope definitely exists, and we should be thriving off of that. My wife is a preschool teacher in Logan Square, and she was just telling me between work and my coming here, how a 16-year-old student at a high school that is where her co-worker's child goes was nabbed by ICE right out in front of his high school down in Pilsen, and he was detained. But the thing, and that's awful, that's what's happening across this city right now. But the thing that was impressive is that everybody mobilized to turn around and fight against that. People at both schools mobilized. They got the mother to be able to get home safely to take care of her other child who's also undocumented because the mom is undocumented, and to make sure that the 16-year-old was brought back home safely. So the fact that despite the dark things that are happening, people have hope. Anything that has happened in this country that's decent, whether it's gay marriage, women getting the right to vote, the end to slavery, all those things happen because regular people stood up and organized and fought back. And I think that's something that we can take heart in, that history still exists, and we can bring that energy back into being. I'm sure many of us were at the No Kings rally this past Saturday, and our own mayor, Brandon Johnson, was saying we need to think about going on a jungle strike if we're going to fight against what's happening in this country right now. I think that's an important sentiment that we need to talk about. He also said the same thing when we were at the Illinois Federation of Teachers meeting that very morning. So I think these are the kinds of things that we can think about and talk about and organize moving forward to bring hope amongst this dark times right now.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Kappa, for having us. It is really a pleasure and an honor to be in this room with so many of you who I've been on the streets with over the years and who've been colleagues and comrades in the work for justice. And I have huge respect always for the work of CAPA, so it's really a pleasure to be here. It's also a pleasure to be in this room. In my congregation, Tzedek Chicago, for the first 3 or 4 years, our high holiday services were always in this room. And I would stand right here leading the services and stare at that bar, that amazing bar, for 2 hours while I led my congregation in prayers of atonement. So this place has a very warm feeling in my heart. No pun intended. So, you know, I've been moved by every speaker I've heard tonight, and it occurs to me that all of our speakers, Sawsan, Andrew, Dennis, all spoke very movingly about their families and the impact that their families had on the people that they are. And it occurs to me that the issue of conscience, which I think is the theme of our evening, I think a lot of it has to do with the heritage of what we were bequeathed by our families, by our parents, by our grandparents, and the stories that we received. So I thought I would start with that because, you know, it seems to me that for me, my own passion for activism definitely comes from growing up in the family that I did, particularly my mother, who was a lifelong activist, both in Los Angeles. When I was growing up in Los Angeles, she was an environmental activist and later on for gun control. And, you know, one of the things I remember about her is that her activism was very organic. It wasn't conscious, it wasn't strategic. She didn't sit down and think, well, what kind of issue do I want to take on today? It really came from a very deep place, and it came from this need. You know, she could not do this work. In fact, it would probably make her crazy if she didn't. That she had to do it for her own self-care. That was a kind of personal therapy in a way to speak out and to be, because otherwise to be silent or to be paralyzed in the face of injustice is just such a much more dismal prospect. And I definitely think I inherited that from my mom. Whatever activism I've been involved in, whatever work I've been involved in organizing and community building, etc., it's never really been by design. It's come from a place deep within that urged me on because that was the only way I could be. And I think that's what ultimately conscience is. It's not something that's planned. It's something that we all have. It's part of all of us, and it's something that we all share. You know, another thing that occurs to me when I think about the issue of you know, when politics fails and conscience takes over, something that Sawsan was quoted as saying in her introduction. The importance of breaking through false narratives, breaking through fake narratives. I think that resonates for me a great deal. You know, we are all taught, and Dennis was talking about this too, about the narratives that we're taught about this country. We are all socialized into accepting certain narratives about the countries we live in, the communities we're a part of, the world in general, and we take them for granted. We treat them as reality. And then there are times where we rub up against the falsity of those narratives, the hypocrisy of those narratives. And I think that has been for me, and I think for many people, also a spark for conscience, when we realize that we've been sold a bill of goods. You know, when we realize that these narratives exist to serve a greater injustice that we were never taught in school. And I can relate to that as a Jewish person. You know, there are very important sacred narratives that were instilled in me from an early age about what it means to be a Jew. Someone mentioned before that dissent is a very sacred principle in Judaism, and I would concur with that. There's a very deep current in Jewish tradition that the world that we've inherited is not a perfect place, it's a broken place, and it is our responsibility to do what we can to repair the world while we are here. And particularly in my parents and my generation, growing up, my parents grew up during the Holocaust, and for me, the Holocaust added another layer of narrative as a Jewish person. And for me, that narrative was that we can never again let this happen to any other people. As victims of genocide, we now have a responsibility to make sure that genocide does not occur, on our watch, as it were. But that narrative was complicated. That narrative was complicated by the existence of the State of Israel. And that Zionist narrative was also a part of my Jewish upbringing. It was also a part of my understanding of what it meant to be Jewish. And that is that Israel, the birth of the State of Israel, was this redemptive moment that emerged out of the Jewish people's greatest tragedy and cataclysm, was this rebirth, this national rebirth in the land. And that was a very powerful narrative for me. I have family in Israel. I visited Israel many times over the years, and it's a very difficult narrative to stand down. Even though it often ran in the face of other narratives that I was taught. I also grew up in a very anti-war family. I was taught from an early age to oppose the Vietnam War and militarism in general. And yet Israel, one of the most militarized countries in the world, somehow, got a pass. That Israeli militarism was redemptive. And so this was always part of my reality, I guess. I lived with these contradictions but never really confronted them. But sooner or later, the tension between these narratives, something had to happen. Something had to happen out of that friction. And for me, it didn't happen until, I was an adult. I was working as a congregational rabbi. Probably not the most opportune time to come of conscience on this issue. But, again, it was one of those things that it was organic. This was now, one of the most important turning points for me was in 2008, 2009, which was a few Gaza assaults ago now, known as Operation Cast Lead. And I had been moving, it was a process. These things also don't happen overnight. They're always a process. And so I'd been moving and questioning, but that was kind of a last straw moment. And there are people in this room I know who remember when this happened for me and who were mentors for me and counseled me when I was in great anguish about this. But basically, I said I can't do this anymore. I can't apologize for this anymore. This is not complicated. This is actually very straightforward. This is oppression. And this has been going on since Israel has been born. Israel was born on the backs of other people. And that sent me down a whole nother road. And one of the things that I think about conscience is it can be a very lonely place unless you have a community of conscience to be part of. You absolutely have to have that. I know, I'm not saying anything that's new to anybody in this room, but we need one another. And thankfully, for me, there was a community of conscience, both a Jewish community of conscience. Jewish Voice for Peace became a very important institutional address for me. And the Palestine Solidarity Movement in Chicago, which is a very amazing, robust movement, became a very important community of conscience for me, as well as nationally and globally. And when I left my congregation in 2014, during another Gaza onslaught, I started a new congregation for Jews who wanted that kind of a community where they could be their whole authentic selves and have their conscience not compromised. So So we were an avowedly anti-Zionist congregation, and remain so. We're now 10 years old. And so that, I don't want to go on for too much longer. I want to say, when I think about the issue of conscience, I think we're definitely in a moment right now. We're seeing it just breaking wide open, both in terms of the solidarity movement around the genocide in Gaza, which is as horrible as the news is every day out of Gaza. There is also the flip side of that, which is this global movement that has grown just exponentially. The rallies that we see all over the world, people filling the streets. In the Jewish community, there are more and more Jews, certainly younger Jews, but not only. And I know this for a fact because I do this for a living. People find out I'm an anti-Zionist rabbi, they call me up and they want to talk about it. So I can tell you, there is a change happening in the Jewish community as well. And that is the flip side of the dismal reality. And the same thing's happening in our city. We every day are reading about high schoolers being snatched off the sidewalk, mothers waiting for their kids to come out of school, yanked out of their cars, gardeners working in Evanston who are taken away in an unmarked car by people in masks, people in Home Depot descended upon. Really, really heinous shit is going on in our city. But we are also hearing and seeing, and I know you've seen these videos, this amazing uprising of neighborhood groups, rapid response teams, and just people who are bystanders, who are finding the courage of their conscience in these moments. You've seen these videos, I'm sure, on social media, of people screaming in the faces of these assholes. and in some cases, driving them away. Right? Much of it is organized, some of it is not, but it's real, and that's something we should take heart in, I think. My wife mentioned to me while we were watching one of these viral videos, she says, don't you remember seeing all those pictures during the Holocaust of Jews being taken away on trains and the people in the cities just sort of standing there watching and not doing anything? And she said, that's not what's happening here. And that's something we should be conscious of and proud of and continue to ramp up and amplify. I don't think we need any urging to do that. I think it's happening in a very real way. So I guess conscience is a two-sided coin. It is living during times of great injustice, but it's also living in times where people, sometimes the most unlikely people, finding the courage of their conscience to come together to form a resistance that will overthrow this injustice. I think with that, I'll stop. We can have a conversation.
Before we take any questions from the audience, we wanted to give you an opportunity if you wanted to respond to each other at all or ask any questions of each other, and then we'll open it up to the audience. If not, we can move to the.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. We had one question that was submitted prior to the panel, which was, how should progressives confront a situation of harsh repression and right-wing governance?
How should progressives respond to authoritarianism?
Yes.
On the high holidays, on Rosh Hashanah this year, I gave a sermon about the fascist moment that we're in, and one of the things I said was that rule number one is do not collaborate. And that might seem obvious, but it's actually it's apparently not that obvious, even among progressives, that there are still those politicians and others who don't recognize that we are not in a normal moment, and that are seeking some kind of accommodation, some kind of collaboration, some kind of way that we can work our way through this. And one of the things I said was that in healthy times, yes, you collaborate. That's a virtue. But in fascist regimes, collaboration has a whole other meaning. And I think we need to accept, I think progressives need to accept that our job is to resist. The MAGA movement is not going to be convinced through collaboration or through a hand being reached out. So that's the one thing, is I think the first order of business is that we resist at every turn, and we don't accept any of it, and we don't accept any of this as normal. As Dennis was saying, it's not just the Republicans and the MAGA and the right wing, the far right wing. Democrats have been part of this, and liberals have been part of this system as well. We need to be honest about the capitulations that have brought us to this moment as well. I think we need to let go of our illusions, and the title of this evening, When Politics Fails. I'm not 100% cynical about politics. I think there is, of course, a place for politics. Politics and electoral work is one of the tools in our toolkit. But we can't fetishize it. We can't treat it as the only means of social change. It's one tool of many that we have in the toolkit, and it's not a perfect one. Rule of law is another one. We tend to fetishize rule of law and think that it's not the politicians who are going to save us, it's the courts who are going to save us. But, we need to keep in mind that, and King mentioned this in Letter from a Birmingham Jail, that we have to keep in mind that everything the Nazis did was quote-unquote legal. Slavery, as Dennis pointed out, was legal in this country for hundreds of years. Apartheid was legal in South Africa. Apartheid is legal in Israel-Palestine at this moment. So, the law can be a tool to create a better society. It can also be a tool to destroy society. And I think we need to not put our ultimate faith in any one of these tools, but understand their utility, but ultimately realize that the real answer is us, right? The ultimate answer is that it's our building of our power together to build that movement of resistance through the use of all of these tools.
That's really right. I mean, there's no doubt that things have gotten worse, but I think we have to remember that things have been bad for a long time, and been bad for a lot of people in this country. And I think what I consider the idea of how do we shift consciousness, it has to be an understanding that many people have many different contradictory ideas in their head. They have mixed consciousness, if you will. On the one hand, they think that we live in a democracy. On the other hand, they hate the fact that when they learn, we actually don't elect our own president. There's this weird thing called the electoral college, which somehow determines a president, where for a couple times within our own generation, the person who got the least votes became president. And so you would think in democracy that actually is not how things work, where the person with the most votes becomes the president, but in this country, it's the opposite. So I think there's opportunities to change the narrative, to shift people and bring them more towards us. Like there's many people who I think are veterans who volunteered to join the military, but are being taught through their own experience in the military that it's a really messed up organization. And all the language that's given to them about how we really cherish our veterans, we care about them, et cetera, it flies in the face when they go to the VA, and oh, by the way, your nursing services have been cut back. Your social worker no longer has a job here. The counselor you were talking to about the things you're struggling with is no longer employed. And so those things are smacking people in the face, and it gives an opportunity, if you will, for us to talk about how do we undermine the status quo and push towards more radical change. So I think, to steal an idea that my wife often uses because she teaches preschool, it's actually a quote from Mr. Rogers, which is find the helpers. Find the people in your community who are doing something to resist. It could be your neighbor, your coworker, your classmate, your family member, and talk with them. Talk with them about what is it that we can do. How do we get together? How do we make these whistles? How do we set up an ice watch? How do we pull our community to fight back against this monstrosity. And again, that can be the hope that leads us and inspires other people who maybe will start to break their own ideas about what they believe in regards to how the society should operate, and they become won over to a different model, a model of peace, justice, and fighting for true humanity that we all deserve.
Okay, I'm Palestinian American, and how can we get our young people to be able to speak up and not to be repressed from speaking? My daughter was president of SGP at a university in Chicago, I won't name it, but anyways, she had to withdraw because she was really afraid. They started doxing people, doxing students, and the president of the university, I mean, she was part of the encampment and they bulldozed it, and then, and that's not traumatic for us Palestinians at all. But anyway, so a lot of the students started withdrawing because they were just so afraid of just standing up. You know, and I don't know how to encourage my children to be able to speak and to tell the truth about what is really going on instead of being repressed. I mean, they're like, and in high school she was getting threats, and all she was doing was collecting money for children in Gaza, and the Israeli club just terrorized her. Thank you. And the Israeli club just terrorized her for a year, and she was just, all she was doing was just raising funds, children helping children, and then when she got to the university, she thought things would get better, but they didn't. So, do you have any words of wisdom?
I don't want to put Andrew on the spot, but because Andrew works with high school students, might have some thoughts about this as well. Or, if you feel like you have some thoughts on that question as well, or not. This backlash is real, and it is fierce. And I'm familiar with what you were talking about. I'm pretty sure I know the school you're talking about. It happened in other schools around Chicago and around the country. I don't know that we need to tell our kids anything. I don't think they need us to tell them. I think they know what's what, and they know what they need to do. But they also know that, when the backlash gets this fierce, and it's going to get worse, that we need to know what to do. We need to make our own decisions about our own self-preservation, and there's no shame in that. I think one of the messages, if there's any message, needs to be that yes, being a person of conscience means making sacrifices, but you don't have to make any sacrifice that you're not prepared to make. That this is a personal decision of yours, but that I respect your conscience. I know and you shouldn't have any. There's no shame in saying I'm gonna sit this one back for now because this is real. This can affect people's careers. This can affect people's lives. So I guess my short answer to that is I don't think they need us to tell them what to do. I think my experience of them is that they know, and that they're going to find a way to do it in their own way, in their own time. I don't know, Andrew, do you want to have anything to add to that?
I'll just speak loud. Pretty much what you said, I think, is the case. I have an anecdote. Our Palestine Solidarity Club, they were visited by the Students for Justice in Palestine from Northwestern, and we took a picture together, and about 2/3 of the kids from Northwestern started covering their faces and putting on masks, and one kid covered all but their eyes, and our students were like, wow, is this what college is like? And they all have to make individual decisions about that, but I think Brant's right. They do know the risks, and they have to kind of navigate that on their own, and those risks are totally unacceptable and are completely unfair, and they themselves are something that we need to fight against. But it did lead to some really good discussions amongst the kids, and also some dissent. Some kids were like, I don't care, I'm gonna go through with this, and some other ones were like, I need to take a step back, and some of their parents were involved, and it's just something they're going through. But, like most things with the kids, I think, we just have to trust them to navigate it and wait until they ask us, and then we can give them our 2 cents. But I know that I've personally never gone through, like, what our, especially our Palestinian and Muslim students are going through right now, so I will do my best to advise them, but I think they're smart. They're going to figure it out.
Just to add real quick, because I know there's other hands up. I think the thing that's so bizarre about the American culture is this lifting up of individuality and individual power, and like these great heroes like Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk are, through their brains and powers, are leaders. And yet when regular people organize and fight back, oh, then you should do it. You should sit down and shut up, take the back seat, somebody else has got this, and take the stretch. So there's that contradiction that we have to overcome and build our own confidence. So the only thing I would say is find your people and start with that circle of trust and then build out. And your actions can inspire others to take more action. Because at the end of the day, it does take mass movement, it does take mass struggle. No individual can actually change history, at least from the regular people, working people like us in this room. And so we have to see each other as the allies that it will take to fight for a better world. And we can take that solidarity as our strength.
Hello, thank you all. Oh, sorry, I'm bad with mics. My name is Bushra Miwala. It's great to be here. The question that I have for you all is, in the intersection of politics and activism is civic engagement. Getting people to exercise their right to vote and choose who they want representing them in government. However, when we have people that are single-issue voters on Israel now, actually, they will only vote for someone that is maybe pro-Israel, as opposed to now when we have people that are single-issue voters on Palestine, they have to pick between the lesser of two evils. So what can we do to engage people in the political process when they don't even see their adequate option represented? Thank you.
I think that's a very important question, and I think we don't look that far in the past. Like the Democratic National Convention took place here in Chicago, and I'm sure many of you too were out in the streets protesting them, justifiably so, because even at that convention, they wouldn't allow a Palestinian speaker who was going to endorse Kamala Harris to come to the floor. I think that is an outrageous indictment of that party and what they stand for. And that is why we need to build an alternative to the two-party system, in my opinion. It's not an easy thing to do, but I kind of feel like it was an icing on the cake. So I agree with what you're saying, is that sometimes it is tough to choose the lesser of two evil, or as I think other people say, the evil of two lessers, which is often what is put before us. We have Harris, who supported the genocide in Gaza, and you have Trump, the orange freak from New York, as running against each other. So we really were not given a true alternative, and so we have to build an alternative party, and while we organize mass movements, because I think it's out of those movements that we'll see alternative political entities come to rise. That's in the United States, like the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, some of them came out, not just those two, but other parties came out of mass struggle, and so we have to build the struggle as strong as we can, and out of that will rise candidates and political organizations that can fight for a different kind of world. One thing that I'm a part of is called United Working Families. We have a chapter in the 50th Ward. I think that's something that people should look at building locally to try and run candidates through, as well as build the movements.
Again, I think when the question is what can we do to convince people? I'm not sure that's, for me, the way in. I think, I've found in my experience that it's very difficult to convince someone of something they're not prepared to accept, especially when the choices they're given are so horrible, and the system, it works so hard against them. That definitely goes for the political process. I see younger people who, and talk to them, who want no part of civic engagement in the political process because they understand that the game is rigged, so why play the game? And I don't necessarily have a good answer to that. I can kind of guide by example of what I was saying before, that yes, electoral politics is flawed and problematic, but it is one tool that we have, and that, you know, whether it's the lesser of two evils or harm reduction, it's often referred to as, you know, but for me, it's not about trying to convince people to participate in a system that does not represent them and does not represent their best interests, but rather work on that system itself. You know, and I think we're starting to see the tentative. I mean, Zoran Mondani is a great example of this. You know, and there's a point by which people are going to say, we're just not going to take this anymore. And we're already seeing the role of the power of AIPAC is starting to wane. There are centrist Democrats who are pledging not to take money from AIPAC anymore. So there's a point by which the system pushes so hard that it overplays its hand, and there's an opening. And I think we may be seeing that, and that may be an opening to have the kind of conversation you're talking about. But we have to be clear that the backlash will be fierce. I don't know how many of you saw this letter by, I think it's like 800 to 900 rabbis now. I don't know if you've seen this. It's shameful. I will just say publicly, as a rabbi, I'm ashamed that this many rabbis signed on to what I consider to be an Islamophobic screed against urging voters not to vote for Mondani. Many of whom don't even live in New York City. So the backlash will be fierce when the system starts to become challenged, and we need to be prepared for that as well. But you know, for me, it's about not necessarily trying to tell people they have to participate in a system that they don't feel represents them, but to understand the bigger picture, I guess, and to understand that system exists within larger systems that can be dismantled, and that's something we can all participate in.
So I do a lot of research, and one of the things that kind of stuck in my head was, why do we have governments anyway? You know, about a dozen people will tell you, well, it's this and this. Some of them are 12 pages, and some of them are 2 paragraphs. But basically, when you nut it down, it's because when people live together, they harm each other unless there is enforcement of laws. There are laws that restrict them, and that enforcement is important. You know, if you harm somebody, you're penalized, and you say, "Oh, damn, that hurt. That's going to cost me. I'm not going to do that again." That's called. I'm really good on words, I think. What's thinking? But anyway, so here we are with a government's purpose is to prevent harm. So we have to have a law enforcement group to make sure that people don't get harmed, and when they do, that we have to prosecute them with laws so that it won't happen again. It's called deterrence. I got it. Okay. Can anybody tell me anything that they've heard that ICE has done that hasn't been a crime? Or that hasn't harmed somebody? I mean, please. I haven't found anything that ICE has done in this country that hasn't harmed somebody. They've sent innocent people to El Salvador detention centers. They've actually arrested, or they beat up senators. You know, I've got about half a dozen different articles about various things they've done. They killed people. You know, I've actually gone to Broadview near Franklin Park half a dozen times because Broadview has a immigration processing center that they turned into an ICE detention center. And that ICE detention center has been enjoying protests for 2 months, actually much more than 2 months now, I guess, because that refers to 2 months was a couple weeks ago. The people in Broadview are really upset about this. So I sat down with the police chief, his name is Thomas Mills, and I explained to him, do you know that the ICE people are not law enforcement officials? Because they do not enforce any laws. They actually only... Oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't lecture, it's not like that.
Thank you. My name's Peter. I'm a physician from the south side of Chicago and a longtime activist on various issues and a recent supporter of COPPA. When Sawsan was saying how surprised she was to be informed that she was receiving an award from COPPA, it reminded me what it's like for a Nobel laureate to get that phone call from Scandinavia that they are receiving a Nobel Prize. Recently, we saw that the Nobel Peace Prize was awarded to Maria Corina Machado. She's not a peacemaker. She's an ally of Trump. She's called for the invasion of Venezuela by the U.S. and by Israel. She's asked for Netanyahu's support with that. So we have hypocrisy from Oslo and murder on the high seas. Unprecedented attacks on unidentified and individuals on private boats in the Caribbean and now in the Pacific. This isn't a slaughter on the scale of Gaza or many other places in the world, but it is a slaughter nevertheless. And my question is, what do you as panelists or anyone else here think we should do to prepare ourselves for the next big conflagration, which seems to be the provocation of a war in Latin America where no war currently exists?
I mean, I think you raised an important point about the geopolitical background that underlies the Trump administration, and I would argue even many administrations before that, in the terms of the U.S. for some time has been an empire in decline. And we can see the decay of it all around us. It's evident in the sense of, I had an opportunity to visit China, the country I was born in, that I lived in as a child, and it was like visiting a first world country. Now, I'm not a fan of Xi Jinping. I don't think China really is socialist or communist or that, even though they call themselves that. But the trains are clean. There's public bathrooms everywhere. I went and had my hand x-rayed because it was having some pain. I saw a doctor in 30 minutes. And I work at Cook County Hospital. You can't even take a dump in 30 minutes in Cook County Hospital. It's just not a thing. And so the fact that other countries can have resources for its people is real. And this country chooses not to do that. This country chooses, not we, but the people who run this country choose to spend half of our tax dollars on destruction, on murder, on burning children alive in places like Gaza. And that's what we have to put a stop to. And what I think this government's trying to do is reestablish itself as the top dog. Post-World War II U.S. that runs the world, and everyone says how high when this government says jump. And the main competitor right now could be China, it could be India, it could be Venezuela. They're trying to establish themselves as dominant over that. So I think it's incumbent upon us to not just be fighting for justice here in this country, but being internationalists, saying that we stand with workers and oppressed people all around the world, whether it's Venezuela, China, Gaza. We are in solidarity with you. We are against what our government is doing to you, and we will fight alongside you for a better and just world.
Okay, I am not going to preach history to you, but I do want to tell you all, remind you all, that we have a model for resistance as done by our founding fathers. And that model is very clear, right? We first try to negotiate with the monarch, and then when they do that, we start becoming independent from that. And I wish this title would have been When Congress Fails, because that's who's failed. Congress has been the one that's failed. Congress is us, right? We elect the representatives. So what we have is a board. So I'm not trying to preach, I'm just trying to tell you that there are groups out there who are working on using the model of our founders in leading that resistance and taking back Congress. And once we take back Congress from the monarch, then we're able to make some accomplishments on all of these issues. And so I would welcome conversations with you. I'm not trying to be an interest. I am running in the 7th district. I'm leading that team to come up with a game plan and a piece of legislation that needs to be passed to close the loopholes that the monarch has taken advantage of in our Constitution and in our laws that we have currently. So I just want to inspire you to not just protest, but become part of the resistance down to Congress, because Congress is the problem. Even though I'm running for office.
The last speaker did not want to put history on you, but I do. And I think we need to remember, not remember, but, well, I remember part of it, unfortunately. But, well, fortunately, I've been very lucky. But we've got to remember that Germany was taken over almost overnight, and Italy was taken over almost overnight by a fascist regime. And the same thing, it's been very, very quick here in the United States, but we need to look at those events and the parallels that we have with them today. And I would like our speakers to draw parallels. I will just tell you one thing, and that was during the Great Women's March, when Trump was first elected, I was carrying a sign that said, Trump and Mussolini. Google it. And almost no young person had any idea who Mussolini was. And I think we need to go back to this history and see the parallels. One of them has been drawn in Germany when the Jewish people were confiscated and people stood by, and I don't think we are doing that now. But there are parallels, actually, in my lifetime that we need to look at that are similar to what is happening in the United States today.
I am in agreement with you. I think we are seeing a form of fascism rising in this country. And oh, okay.
I wanted to appreciate you for changing authoritarianism.
Thank you for changing authoritarianism to fascism. You said that, and I appreciated it at the time. I forgot to mention that.
You're welcome. Yeah, I mean, they all have manifest in different ways, but they all go by the same basic playbook, and they all historically, unfold in a very basic way. And the tactics used by regimes are similar. It means vilifying a certain group of people to consolidate power. I'm not sure I would agree that young people don't know, history. I think they do. It's not our job to necessarily teach them history. I think they're learning it in their way in this moment, much more than we realize. But I absolutely think that these parallels are important to draw out. I think we need to remind people when we use words like fascism and they react against it. You need to resist that. That's what this is. This is not what we were seeing is not normal. But those parallels are very real.
I'm definitely not a young person. I'm going to be 50 this coming July. But I live with a young person. My son is just turned 18. And I think, like many young people, just in conversation with him, are very cynical about the world because they see the devastation, they see the climate change, and they wonder what kind of future holds for our generation. And us and the politicians have not provided an answer that makes sense to them, at least as far as I can tell. And so I think they do know history, and it is important to understand that. You were talking about Germany. I mean, it's important to remember that World War I ended with a revolution in Russia. And that revolution didn't spread to other places in the world, unfortunately. And so what you saw in Germany was massive reparations, war reparations by the British and by the US governments on Germany, which led to massive poverty. And that was the dust and soil that Hitler was able to build his politics on, saying, you guys should be against how these other countries are oppressing us, join me and I will make Germany great again. And that sounds very familiar to what we're seeing around us right now, and Trump's desire to make America the boss of the world, such as they were following World War II. And where did Hitler start with? Unions, communists, leftists. That's who he started killing, murdering, taking away, because he knew if there was no one else to stand up for bigger groups of people, it would make it easier for him to do what ended up, as we know, tragically happened with the final solution. So it is incumbent upon us now to understand the history, to organize ourselves, and to resist what is happening with every fiber that we can, and build that community and build that resistance as broadly as possible. Because as I forget who it was specifically, one of Hitler's top officers even said, if they had smashed our Nazi party when it was small, we never would be able to grow. And that is something I think we need to take to heart moving forward.
Thank you both, Dennis and Brant, so much for your comments and for your examples of conscience and for the work that you do. So, to close out our time together, I would like to introduce Kappa board member, community activist, and performance artist Orion Meadows. Yeah, Orion is a National Spoken Word Award winner and Kosuth Center for Inner City Studies Slam champion. He uses his poetry to bring awareness about issues such as poverty, mass incarceration, and the violence in our society. He teaches Dr. King's philosophy of nonviolence at the Institute for Nonviolence Chicago and is the media manager for Adler University, Illinois' Coalition for Higher Education in Prisons. And I'll just mention, before I turn it over to Orion was also generous enough to provide us all with a copy of his piece. So you have the opportunity to savor his words in real time, in person, and then also to copy home with you. So thank you for doing that, Orion.
A nation that spends more money on its military defense and war than on the social upliftment of the poor is well on its way to spiritual decay. MLK. From our youth, we are taught by the school system that we reside in the land of the free. But I guess that would be the mantra of the beneficiaries of wealth built upon stolen land. Land of the free, except healthcare, clothing, hell, even the water we drink nowadays is up for sale. And who would have thought the very things nature bestowed to us freely will someday be packaged up and sold to us to be bought. Our right to life is labeled as propaganda for the left, while the citizens are suspended in the center of chaos perpetuated by political tricks of pimps and polemicists that preach prosperity for the people but plunder the planet for its riches and hoard the profits. While pushing a pipe dream of equality in a system that thrives off the labor of those whose living wage is of the lower brackets. We, the people, was never meant to be all-inclusive, but a proclamation of liberty conducive to attaining power for those that intended to be rulers. A phrase often invoked to provoke the common folk to fight to preserve the status of oligarchs who have set out to rule us. So many souls sacrificed upon the altar of Aries. Some buried on memorial soil. Others still amongst the living, yet not given the adequate honor for their service. So they're treated as though they are worthless. By their own government, they've been deserted. For the flag they stood up but was let down, and now society keeps them while they're lying there as though they deserve us. Sometimes the thought brings my mind to a song about a homeless man called Mr. Window. And I think, was this reality a result of mere circumstance, or did chance provide a moment for opportunity to present itself? But somehow he just missed the window. Nevertheless, whether you're from the rural plains of Tennessee or the Midwest concrete streets of Milwaukee, we're all just everyday people with a voice or rather a speech that only needs an audience or an ear to hear the story of why we are here. The journey of our human existence, whether collective or respective, is one of a hero's tale that entails the oscillations of this mortal experience in which we have endured to prevail. For monarchs and emperors produce dynasties that collapse and fail. But the spirit of humanity with its capacity to love is a vibrant power. Whenever it's tapped in, simply cannot fail. If we reevaluate our values as a species and place them not in materialism but in empathy and compassion, so posterity will learn not to be cruel, we will find ourselves abiding in a brave new world, basking in the resplendence of each other's existence, where we extract the true wealth of the earth, inherent in the golden rule. So, yes, my name is Orion Meadows. I teach Dr. King's philosophy of nonviolence at the Institute for Nonviolence Chicago. I heard some things here that resonated with the work that I do. It's wonderful to be in here, in a sense, right? That we're all here together, and we're fighting, we're resisting. But then there's an unfortunate side of it as well. Some of the things, some of the issues that have been addressed, that have been talked about. I've seen some of the effects already with what has happened with this regime where I work with, and in the communities where I work, on the south side and the west side of Chicago, with the cuts of the funding. A lot of the people who are doing the frontline work in CVI, which is community violence intervention work, they've been removed. And that is, intentional. Because if you have these programs and you have these organizations that are trying to intervene and prevent the violence in the community, then what you do is you orchestrate chaos, which then justifies you coming in and bringing in militarism. So I've seen that a lot. Now, I heard something about education. I won't speak too long. They did give me 10 minutes, so I'm going to use my 10. Where I teach, a lot of them do not know this. They don't know, American history. They don't know world history. They don't know the history even of what has happened in their own community. Like with the Black Panther Party and Fred Hampton Sr. A lot of them don't. And so I think that we have to do a better job with trying to educate the different demographics about their history, collective and respective. So that's just something that I just on my heart. And even learning about one another's movements. Because sometimes it seems like we work in silos, or just what we're doing is so important that what other people are doing, we don't have time to get involved in that. And I'm speaking from experience, because in the communities where I teach, climate change, some of the issues as far as like the wars that's going on around the world, they feel like it's not relevant to the issues that they have going on. But there is an interconnectedness. It's just about being able to show them how these things are connected, and how what's happening in one community or in one part of the world does have an effect on what's happening in your community. So I just wanted to speak upon that. So also, some of the work that I do, I'm a board member here at Kappa, and my job is to talk about higher ed in prison, and also what is happening in the as far as violence is concerned in the inner cities. So I also do work with One Aim Illinois Gun Violence Prevention organization, and what we were able to do successfully, we were able to get the homicide data transparency bill passed. Just what was it, earlier this year, right? So yeah, and we have a whole coalition of people, and I just want us to continue to do this work, but also reach out to other people that are doing the work as far as violence is concerned, because there are so many facets and nuances of violence, and we need to have solidarity to be able to have this resistance. Because that's what happens. They separate people, and then they attack one group, and they attack the next group, and then before you know it, all these different groups have been oppressed or suppressed. And one way of doing that is having them divided and separate, and so that they feel like their own issues are important and what other people have going on is not of any relevance. So it's just about going out and reaching out to one another and showing that all our causes are important, and that we need to learn about one another's issues and one another's history so that we can come together and be able to properly resist this regime. So I'm going to end it with this last piece entitled Legacy. God told Abraham that he'd make his descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky. Well, I talked to God and said that I'd like these words to resonate to the four corners of the earth before I die. Legacy. What will you leave when you're gone? What things will they have to say when you pass away? I don't know how long I'll be here. None of us does. The only thing that's certain in this vast universe is change. Everything in existence, every moment occurring is fleeting. From the time of conception, we experience change until the moment when the heart stops beating. One man's entire lifespan is less than a mere twinkling in the all-seeing eye of the Creator. So take not one moment for granted of this life you've been granted, for it's by grace each of us inhabits this planet. It's a gift bestowed upon us like the parable of the talents. Now, will you take it and multiply it? Or will you ungratefully bury and plant it, but not water the seed? God told Abraham that he'd make his seeds like the grains of the sand. And I don't have any seeds, but I hope the thoughts I conceive spawn spiritual birth in the minds of the gangsters on the street corners, immersing them with poetic words as deep in content like the waters of the seas. Bearing fruits like apples and oranges and trees, producing things with depth and meaning is a testament to my life's work, a lasting memorial before I leave. Our lives are like the leaves that fall in the autumn and wither. For our time on this plane is just a season. So while we're here, we should take the time to search deep inside our minds to find the true reason for our being. Each one of us will find something. It's only if it's just that one thing in this lifetime to believe in. To hold to wholeheartedly, harbor it in our souls, treasure it deep like gold, standing steadfast and resolute as we strive to achieve it. Because before you know it, it could all be over. But any moment underneath the sun could be the time you'll be leaving. So just think about your life and what type of memory to posterity that you will be leaving. Legacy. So I want to leave you with this. These closing thoughts. Some people may be nervous about following their conscience. What does that mean? How much risk must they take? One suggestion is to remind people that everything counts. A small act of kindness to someone in need or to a stranger. A call to letter to a representative attending a rally to protest ICE or a rally to protest the wars. And in dark times, little daily acts of conscience will add up to real resistance of the bully state and will bring hope to our friends and neighbors. So go out tonight and remember to do one little thing each day. And that will be your legacy. All right, everybody. Thank you for coming. Thank you for showing up. David, you want the mic? Okay, all right, everybody. Have a nice night. Thank you all for coming.
We are indivisible. We are indivisible. When our hearts are joined with kindness and with love, we are indivisible. We are indivisible. We are indivisible. When our hearts are joined with kindness and with love, we are indivisible. We cannot be divided, we can't be torn apart. When we stand together with one heart, no matter who it is, when the rights have been denied, with them we stand side by side. Everyone, we are indivisible. We are indivisible. When our hearts are joined with kindness and with love, we are indivisible. Trump rounds up immigrants and puts them in chains. Without due process, he puts them on planes and takes them to prisons where they throw away the key. But we will not stop fighting for the right to be free. We are indivisible. We are indivisible. When our hearts are joined with kindness and with love, we are